to another PostCult Worldview ride-along. To begin, I ask that you remember your time as a Jehovah's Witness. I'm sorry. Picture yourself at a district convention, and there's someone on stage sharing an experience of how they became a Jehovah's Witness, how they came into the truth. And in this experience, they're praying to God that He give them a sign, or perhaps that they meet somebody that can help them with a problem they're having. And right at that moment, there's a knock at the door, and it's Jehovah's Witnesses. Now, is that a coincidence, or did God actually send Jehovah's Witnesses to that person's door? Of course, Jehovah's Witnesses are meant to believe that God sent those people, or an angel, and this is proof that God is using this organization. But I would hear an experience like that and think to myself, man, at any given moment there must be an awful lot of people who are praying, and we are out there constantly knocking on doors. Now, in my territory, or the territory that my old congregation covered, we only reached every house. You know, we didn't even do it once a year. Sometimes it was 2 years for us to cover it, because we had a large area. But I know there are congregations out there where they're covering it once a month, or even more often in some of the big cities where they have these tiny little territories. So I guess the thought I had was the real miracle would be that no one ever said, I was just praying and you knocked on my door. With as many people that are praying, and it is aggressive as Jehovah's Witnesses are with their recruiting efforts, of course that's going to happen. And yes, that's going to seem profound to the person. You know, they're in a vulnerable spot in their life. That's why they're having this earnest prayer, and somebody knocks on their door. You know, that's going to seem like God Himself has knocked at your door, and you're much more likely to study then. And if you study and you are in a vulnerable place, you're much more likely to buy it, get baptized, and end up on a stage talking about it. Okay, so it's a coincidence. That's what if you're a former Jehovah's Witness, that's what you're most likely thinking. It's just a coincidence. But what about now that you are no longer a Jehovah's Witness? Do you see things happening in your life that you give meaning to? Are there synchronicities that seem to be more than coincidence? Well, let's talk about a couple of examples. Let's say that you are out driving and you're approaching an intersection, as I am right now, and you have a little fender bender with somebody, and you get out of your car, and lo and behold, it's somebody you went to high school with. And you exchange phone numbers, and your families end up being really close, and it really feels like the universe was bringing you together, or God was bringing you together. What were the odds that you were going to bump into that person? Let's say their name was Frank. You bump into Frank, and he's somebody you went to high school with. And let's say that right behind him is Tim, somebody you don't know, never met, totally unimportant to you. Let's say that you hit that intersection a couple seconds later and bumped into Tim instead of Frank. What would be the odds that you bumped into Tim? Statistically, would there be any difference between bumping into Frank and bumping into Tim? Statistically, the odds are the same that you're going to bump into either one. But we give meaning to bumping into Frank because we have an association with Frank. We are pattern-seeking people, and we try to find meaning in things. Being pattern-seeking has served us well, evolutionarily speaking. Let me illustrate this point about probability and pattern-seeking. Imagine you had a deck of cards, and you take the spades out of that deck. So you have the ace through king of spades, 13 cards. You shuffle them out the best you can and lay them out left to right, face up. And it's ace, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, jack, queen, king. And you think, wow, what are the odds that I would lay these cards out in this order? It's got to be astronomical. And then you take the cards and you put them all back together and you shuffle them again and you lay them out and you get 3, 7, king, ace, jack, 10, on, 13 cards in what appears to be a random order. Take it a third time, shuffle them, deal them out again, another order. Another apparently random order, but different than the order that they were in the second hand. Now, all 3 hands have been a specific order. Is there any difference in terms of probability between these 3 hands? No, there isn't. They're all statistically the same. Each a very specific order that would be highly improbable to deal exactly the same a second time. But one of those 3 seems more unlikely because we see a pattern that is meaningful to us as humans. So this seems counterintuitive, but really everything that happens to us moment by moment is incredibly, inconceivably improbable. Now, another thing that happens related to coincidences or synchronicities is that we tend to count the hits and ignore the misses. For example, imagine the phone rings and it's Bill, and you were just thinking of Bill. Is there some type of quantum entanglement or psychic connection going on that you were just thinking of Bill and the phone rings and it's Bill? Surely he must have decided to call you because you were just thinking of him. Maybe that's possible. But consider this. Moment by moment, think of all the thoughts that go through your mind. Think of how many people you think of in a week. And all those times that you think of somebody, nothing happens. No phone rings. You don't see the person walking by. It just goes on in your mind, passes on. So those are all misses that you don't notice, but you do notice when there's a synchronicity. But does that mean that that there's any mystical property to that synchronicity, or is it just a coincidence? I don't know. The skeptic in me is inclined to think it's all just coincidences. But I'll tell you this, as I get further away from the Jehovah's Witness organization and am feeling more comfortable with thinking of bigger esoteric concepts, I'm willing to give myself a little wiggle room in this area. Now, with that in mind, I want to share an experience with you. Don't picture me on the stage at a district convention. Picture me in bed. But first, a little background. 2 things you need to know. One is that I've had an interest in kirtan lately. Google it. Kirtan. K-I-R-T-A-N. This is the chanting of ancient Vedic mantras. These mantras have deep, profound meaning, and when done in the kirtan setting, it's basically a call and response chanting, where the artist on stage will sing this melody of these ancient Sanskrit words, and you, the audience, sings the melody back. And it can go on for 10, 15 minutes, and it turns almost into this group meditation. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. I highly recommend it. And I've been to 3 of these kirtan events now, and at 2 of them, there was an artist that performed at both. And he's got one melody that he sings that gets stuck in my head. It's a song that has 2 melodies that he alternates back and forth with. Each melody has different Sanskrit lyrics. But I always get the one part that is almost like the chorus of the song stuck in my head. And I never think about the other line. So that's the first thing you need to know, and I'm going to come back to that. The other thing you need to know is that a dear friend of ours has been pregnant, and is very, very pregnant. The due date is right around the corner. Okay, now keep those 2 things in the back of your mind. Now back to picturing me in bed. I get to bed really late this night. I've been laying in bed and putzing around on my phone, playing a game, looking at Facebook, and I end up turning out the light at 1:30 and I fall right to sleep. Now a little later, I wake up pretty much out of a dead sleep with this incredible feeling of love in my heart, just like glowing with love. I get up, I use the restroom, I get back in bed, and I look at my phone, and it's only 2:30, only an hour has passed, and I remember thinking, man, it seems like I've been sleeping a lot longer than that. I get back in bed, and with this deep feeling of love in my heart, I cuddle up against my partner, Emily. This is maybe more information than you want, but this wasn't about sex. It wasn't an amorous feeling. It was just this love, and I wanted to connect. And so I kind of cuddle up against her. She snuggles back against me, so we're spooning, all right? And I put my arm around her as this feeling keeps growing, and I put my hand on her heart, and I just have this intense experience. And eventually, I just come down, back to baseline, and I feel ready to go back to sleep. And I turn onto my right side, and I fall right to sleep through the night, and in the morning, I wake up. Emily is already awake, and she's looking at her phone, and she says, this friend had her baby. She went into the hospital at 1:30. She had already been in labor for a while, an hour or 2, went into the hospital at 1:30, and the baby was born at 3 o'clock. And so I tell Emily what I just told you, that I had this intense feeling, and that I bet you anything, that moment when I came back down to baseline and could go back to sleep, I'm convinced that is when the baby was born. And that period of intense love was the kind of culmination of bringing this child into the world. Because I bet you it was about a half hour that I was having this really intense feeling. And here's the final detail, kind of the cherry on top, was that during that time that I was having this intense feeling, I was having those lyrics going through my mind from that one artist that I always get his song stuck in my head. And it wasn't the part that usually gets stuck in my head. It was the other part of the song that I normally wouldn't even be able to recall, but I had that going through my head again and again and again. And I hummed it to Emily, and she right away knew which part it was. And I asked her, what do those words mean? And I'll put the Sanskrit words in the description below, because as I'm driving here and talking, I'm not going to be able to recall them. But what the words mean are, may all beings be happy and free. So that was my message to this child coming into the world. Now, is it possible that this was just a coincidence? Absolutely. But that was not my reality. That was not my experience. My experience was that something special happened early that morning. And it's meaningful to me. So here's my question to you, and I guess it's multifaceted. How do you feel about synchronicities? that appeared to be more than a coincidence. Are they just coincidence? Is there something deeper going on? Something cosmic or metaphysical or mystical? Or is it just a coincidence? And if it is just a coincidence, is there any harm in knowing on some deeper level that there is something significant about it? What do you think? At this stage in your post-cult development, what do you think? Comment below, let me know. And remember, there are more things in heaven